What's up, Ramblers? Your favorite CEO is back. And before we begin today's podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode. And follow Assistance HQ and Offsource HQ across all platforms to stay up to date on the latest content, updates, and more. And remember, if you need a virtual assistant, visit us at offsource.tech. Now, before we begin, a word from our sponsor. Hey guys, welcome back to another wonderful episode of The Ramblings. And I always say it's wonderful. And I actually have a dear colleague and close friend with us today. Actually, one of the people who helped bring me into Master Networks, and I am part of his Monday morning amazing pumped up kickstart to the weekend over in Queens. David Carley of Pangea Enterprises and the founder of the Queens Master Network chapter. How are you doing today? Introduce yourself. Let everybody know what's going on in David's world today.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Things are going great for us. David's world is bright and sunny with a slight breeze. It's not hot, so I'm enjoying that. Things are going good. Things are going good with us. We're finding slowly the people that we want to be helping, turning over more stones, helping people get themselves prepared to lead to the future and not just sit around waiting for things to happen.
I like that. So you help people, you support. Give us some background on what it is that you do and how you kind of help people.
We have a few facets to the company. We were founded as a leadership and executive development firm, partnering with at the time, back in 2003, it was unheard of, but a fractional CFO forensic accounting. So we had someone we had people that would dissect a company from a numbers perspective. And then we had myself and another who would take that information and apply it to people and operations. Because while the numbers look great on paper, they don't always translate well to the other real life of doing business.
Right.
So we had to make it work both ways. Our first client was someone that was successful, that had great success, but they had a dysfunctional team.
Okay.
And they knew they had a dysfunctional team, and we were tasked with making them functional.
What does dysfunctional mean in that sense? Like when you say dysfunctional, so like, just so we can give the audience some kind of perspective. When you say dysfunctional, do you mean in terms of like communication, in terms of workflow, organization? Like what is dysfunctional in that sense?
Yes, yes, and yes. Any combination thereof or piece. So it could be anything where they don't communicate well. They don't have good systems in place to accomplish that. They don't have good methods of sharing or developing or promoting staff or complimenting staff. They don't have good methods of process to getting their job done. It's just kind of haphazard, and it gets there by some hook or crook. But if there were specific systems and or process, it would make them more effective and efficient, which would make them more productive. So there's a number of different things that could go into that could create a dysfunction, from personality clashes to office environment to lack of access to decision makers that we come in and root out. And we're brought in when a company's decision maker has gone through the stages of acknowledging that there's a problem, accepting that it exists, and then asking for help. And so this gentleman did that. He had a hedge fund. He was in a board retreat that I ran, said, could you do this for my company? I said, I could do something like it, but I've got other ideas because I can't do this method because it belonged to who I was working for at the time. And he said, okay, great. That sounds like fun. I've got 14 people. They're almost combative, but not physically combative, but almost sometimes. And they do their work, but they don't help each other do their work. And they could be so much more successful if they worked together instead of antagonistically. I'm
Right.
like, fabulous. That's what we do. That's so we can help that. That's a piece of cake. Um, it's really not a piece of cake, and it's not something that happens over a weekend. And what I had to get the gentleman to commit to was that this was a long-term process that he had to put into and be part of every step of the way. And I also had to get him to commit to that it may not all work out.
Right.
What you have now may not be what you leave with. It happens. Um, and he agreed to everything except that part. He's like, this is my team. I know they're broken. Your job is to fix them no matter what. Which is great on a whole bunch of aspects. You know, what a great, perfect first client for a company that does this. And what a great thing to hear as a member of that team from your leader. That you can say anything, do anything, act anyway, or whatever. I believe in you. You can't hurt me no matter what. And when we're all done with this, you're going to be here because I really want you here. And I'm willing to do the work to keep you here. You know, it sets the playing field for a whole lot to happen, good and bad, so you can get to the great. And so that's how we started, and that's what we did. And we began to work with companies in that facet where we worked from a numbers perspective and from a team building executive development perspective. Not everybody had the skills that they needed to play well together or to lead. And so we would help them get to that point where they were not managing things, but leading things and being in that perspective. And they're two very different perspectives and personalities and roles in a business.
I definitely agree. So it's primarily, I would say, like business development with, mid to larger size kind of companies, right?
It is business development, and it doesn't matter. We've worked with larger companies. We've handled crisis in larger companies, but we've also helped companies that were 3 people become 17 and 7 figures in less than 2 years.
That's a pretty substantial increase under your belt right there.
Yes.
So you said back then it wasn't like as popular. It was like kind of relatively new and everything. What put you in a position to kind of attack that particular niche and market?
Need. There were companies that were challenging, companies that were going through growth. In the 90s provided exceptional opportunity. People took advantage of that, but then they didn't know how to manage what they had or their size. And putting people into a role is one thing. Getting people to fit in the scheme is a whole other animal. And there was a lot of development and a lot of hiring that was done that didn't follow that suit. They'll just adapt, or the bodies in place are more important. We'll figure the rest out later. And that works so long as a company is making money.
Right.
When challenges present, then they have to evaluate what's going on and look at doing steps and taking steps to fix what may not be as optimal as it should be. In the case of the first client that we had, they were very successful, but he knew they could be more successful. And he recognized that he had gone through their stages and put people's in place and took the best of what he could find, not considering how well they'd all work together and buy into the system and what the ultimate goals are. And then when he was at a point where he could focus on that, there was nearly chaos under his belt. And so he committed to fixing that.
Okay.
And it's a process, and it's a long-term process. And if you're committed to it and you're going to keep people in place and reward them for that, then that's part of the process because it's an ongoing thing. And I can say that 18 years later, they're still doing it.
That's pretty amazing. So we've had some great conversations over the past and some great bond breakout sessions. I'm going to jump right into some like heavy hitting questions. Now, we've talked about the development of how businesses operated before versus how business operate now. And one of the probably the most key contributor to that is technology. And we talked about how you guys went from having a website to not having a website and all of that kind of stuff. What have you seen in terms of development and how businesses operate and how businesses then go about doing their business development? How has technology affected that in your opinion?
If you do not know how to use it or use it properly, effectively, it can be a detriment. People think, oh, you have to have a website. Great. Who's going? How are you getting people there? What's driving the traffic? What's the reason they're going to find you? Having a website is perfect, but how do you get the first and foremost thing is driving traffic to it.
Right.
The second and equally as important thing is, what does it tell me? I worked with a gentleman who up and down swore to me the first and foremost, a website. We'll be able to do X, Y. We have a website. I'm like, great. What are you putting on the website? What information am I putting on this website?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to forget about inspiring people, forget about motivating them to do and be part of the program or buy the products or whatever. What's your content? Because that's what keeps people there. That's what draws their interest. That's what makes them want to be part of what you're doing, whether it's selling something, a service, a program, a nonprofit, whatever that is, the content drives them to purpose.
Right.
And if you don't have the content, the website is might as well be a parking lot down the street, because it's going to be as effective. So those are two very, very important things. What is getting your message out? What are you doing? You mentioned what we did. We talked about crisis management. We talked about change and acquisitions and growth. We were being brought in to fix problems.
Right.
And by the time I got off the elevator and got to the CEO's office, there'd be 6 other problems we'd have to deal with because people would look us up. Back then, Google didn't exist. Sorry, kids.
So wait, okay.
Yahoo us or something.
I was just about to ask that question. What were you using for search then? I guess back then.
Yahoo was a big search engine at that time.
That's a long time ago for the people. Like I have never used Yahoo as a search.
So that's what was available. That's what people did, and they'd come up with that, and the website would pop up and they'd be like, we're all getting fired. Our jobs are being moved to India. There's 3 people going to be doing our role. How do we determine? And it just was chaos. And we were over there to try and fix chaos.
Right.
So after being beat over the head a couple, 3, 4 times, I said, okay, erase the footprint. Nothing digital. No website, no anything, no logos. I want to be as invisible as possible. And so that's what it was. And we survived and thrived on this guy telling that girl, telling this guy who we were and what we did.
Okay.
And it was all about the referral, and that was necessary and important because how easy is it for you to ask for help?
Not that easy.
Right. So take an entrepreneur or somebody who's had some success or built some things up, and that means something. People look up to them and they have the success, but they got problems. They don't want people to know they have problems. And then to ask for help on the problems, those are very tough things to ask. So I am only doing that through a very trusting relationship. Going to a website and seeing pretty pictures of people sweating and scuba diving or swinging off of ropes or whatever crazy things we do to build teams or have successes and go through process or growth in the lunchroom, none of that matters. Because all of those are people that I don't know anything about. And all of the people leading those things or helping build those things and processes, I don't know. So I'm not talking to them. So it wouldn't do us any good,
Right.
because I need to have a trusting relationship. My team needs to have a trusting relationship with the individual for them to be able to say, we're messed up, I need help. You think you can help us?
Right.
So that's why it really hasn't mattered to us, and we approach the site as a place. People are gonna like, oh, I'm gonna check out your website. Great, why? What are you gonna learn? What information are you getting? And that's a great way to shape your website if you have services and things that can benefit from that. If I have a product or I have a service that can be utilized from people that doesn't require a lot of trust, then yes, I want everybody in the world to be able to type gobbledygook in there and find my site to sell gobbledygook. But if that's not what's happening, then I've got to build a trust to it.
Right.
And I've got to move that forward. So your content must describe that if you're going to have this. And it must be utilized in that sense. If not, then you need to use other places people go to let them learn about who and what you are, because that's what drives decisions.
Okay. So how do you feel that the technological trend, though, has affected how businesses develop or in general go about their own business development?
Access to information is instantaneous. So I can learn about certain things. I can see certain things. So if I put the right content out, I put the right message out, people will get to know me or my philosophy and say, wow, I like the way that Angelo sources people to go to companies. That's really interesting. I like his approach to handling that temporary position. It's unique, it's caring. I want to go to him. That comes from your messaging. That comes from your content, not just having something, but how it's completed. So technology allows us more than ever right now to create opportunity for people to learn about us from a distance
I like
that
that.
they didn't have before.
So what was it like before? So in seeing like how things have kind of changed and everything, what before there was Google and everything, and I'm sure Yahoo was pretty big at one point, but before that was the large case, what was the primary way people went about trying to get someone to know about their business, to learn more, and how did they kind of break down that trust barrier?
Well, it was either being able to meet with someone, or you go to your website and you look at somebody's bio if it happens to be there, which are all steps that somebody can do now. But I don't necessarily have to go meet you. I can check your bio and see, okay, you hold this position, so you're making these decisions, and then I go and look for you on social media and see what your activity is there and see what those philosophies are. And your company has a philosophy. Does what you're posting out there match that? That didn't exist before. It was limited as to I type in your name, I might see you in a school roster somewhere where you went to elementary school or high school or college, that you were an all-star soccer player, and then you're in this business and you're listed on this business's website. And that was my content. And then I'd call my friends, hey, have you ever done anything here? You know anybody associated with that? Or if you're in the same community or neighborhood or city, I might go visit your company and see about what your company's doing, or call you up and say, hey, I'd like a meeting to talk with you. And we do a face-to-face, and we either click or we don't click. And that's what you had. That was at your disposal. That's how business was done. That's how business was built. And if it wasn't through a referral or networking organization where I would, call up all my friends in networking, hey, have you ever dealt with offsource? Hey, have you dealt with offsource? I go through all those channels of that interpersonally,
Right.
to find someone connected to you, or I just call you and make that appointment and take the plunge. Now I could create a whole dossier on you through 3, 4, 5 different social media channels and other bits, and have not had to meet you yet.
What's going on, Ramblers? I don't mean to interrupt today's podcast, but we have a quick mid-roll from our sponsors.
Very true. So in regards to that, I think that's a pretty big thing, like with how businesses used to operate with how businesses operate now. And so one of those things, as you said, is the access to information. And I think that's a very key point because access to information is only available now. It's worldwide at this point, basically, except for like the countries that you really can't like access internet and everything. But at least within,
It's censored.
within our areas, it's pretty much
Right.
free basis. And so before, access was very limited to the people that had the ability to get there versus the people that didn't. And so how did you get access? So when you talked about like the companies and going to visit, how do you get access to be able to call the CEO or the boss of this small time company or a large or mid-sized company versus, being able to go set up a meeting, you have to go in, the legwork and all of that kind of stuff. How does that legwork change? Like, because you do networking now and we do networking virtually and everything kind of, but back then that required like handshaking and baby kissing and finger waving and all that kind of stuff. How does the access of information, like, how was that back then? How did people gain access to that kind of information in those circles if they weren't part of them already?
It would be learning where those circles were, and understanding who the key people might be in a company that you want to work with. The so-called gatekeeper. Who was going to get me access? Do I go through some executive assistant? Do I go through human resource? Do I go through finance? Every company is going to be different, but there's somebody that can say, I'll get you to that person. And that's where you got to find out. And sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes it's because you know somebody who knows somebody, and you build the channels. The theories on networking and communication and connecting aren't different today than they were. It's either about what can you do for me, or it's about how can I help you and how can I help those you know. So the two mentalities, the two processes existed and have been in existence, and people make successes out of either of them or both of them if they need. But the process is, how do I get to the right person that I know? And years ago, it was like, okay, where's this company? And before the LinkedIn's, before the Facebooks, before then, we didn't have access to that information. So it was on the ground work, finding out who was connected, going into the right circles, understanding who they might be, and you had access to whom the members were of these certain groups. And then you decided whether or not you wanted to be part of that group so you could get access to those people. Now there's it isn't necessary, and there's a whole other way to work in that by getting information, and processing it and utilizing where it goes, and then staying connected. And that's another piece I'd like to talk about in a bit, but access to how to find those people is very different now. Before, it was utilizing whatever search tool you could to see who was a group, who was part of the group, and did you want to be connected to someone there, and then working through whomever was the representative that showed up at the chamber meeting to get to the decision maker. Was it the decision maker? Oh, fabulous. Was it not? Damn, who do I got to go to next?
Right.
And making friends with that person to find out. And so, there were lots of cigars and scotch and other things that were exchanged to get to the right place. And I'm not ashamed to say that that's just how things were done.
No, I like that. I actually want to touch on that real quick, because I grew up in a weird, unique era, and I was born in '97. So that's some context for a lot of people listening and everything. Growing up, it was a weird shift. So I was born in the '90s and the early 2000s, before Facebook and everything like that. All the business, all the media, everything that we saw about the stock market, everything that we saw about Wall Street could be summed up probably in like a movie or something like that, probably like The Big Short or anything, where everything was about shaking hands, kissing babies, all that kind of good stuff. The scotch, the account expenses. Mad Men, I think, is a perfect example of how business had operated up until probably like the early 2000s, up until Facebook, I think, I think up until Facebook, how people in the Mad Men world operated and everything in terms of how you had to go get clients, how you had to meet people, what it took to really even just close the deal, right? So back in the day, now before my time, I guess I'll say, closing a deal was like a large thing. Now because of the instant communication and all this other stuff, deals can be closed like that. Like people are closing $1 million deals in a week, whereas before, as you were talking about, everything was built upon trust. Like I had to trust you, I had to like you, you had to be giving me the best deal in order for you to earn my business.
Right.
And that's kind of what I grew up on and what I saw in terms of business. But as things kind of shifted into the internet and I grew with it, things went all the way left field, or all the way like front field, if you will. In regards to how you made that switch. Now, you said you didn't have a website or anything, but with how you network, you're currently in Master Networks and everything. But before that, give some insight on how you were doing like networking. What was your in? Like, did you have like a special closing? Did you have like a great place that you would take people to? Give us like, what was some of the tactics that you were using in the field?
It was New York City. Who doesn't like Sparks and Peter Lugers? And I'll keep it clean. There were a number of different ways and a number of different things, and it was how you treated people. This goes across multitude of industries. I worked with pharmaceutical industries. They were renowned for doing this. But it is, you bring people in and you show them a good time. And we happen to be in and around the New York City area. So there's things that they want to do. They want to see something happening at Madison Square Garden or something on Broadway or see some other site in the city, go to some of these places that they've only heard of, but don't get to experience because it's the one in New York City and therefore it's that much greater. So that was a large part of what went on and how business was done and how business grew and where we were able to entertain and coerce people to do. The golf course was key still, an imperative, and so much happened there. But being able to entertain after work was a necessity, and a greater necessity there into what was going on and how you would close deals. And it's part of the culture in other parts of the world, and unadmittedly so, it's definitely part and root of the culture here in doing those things. There are many who will say that no decision in Japan gets made in the boardroom, it gets made at the sake house afterwards. And that's very true. But the same is, it could be held here. More deals were closed at Knickerbocker or Sparks or Peter Luger's than were anywhere on Wall Street, because I got to know you. We're in this casual setting. We let our guard down a little bit on both sides, and there's give and take and development that comes through, so that bargaining then comes to fruition and we come to a deal because I get to know you. Now technology and things have grown, things have developed. I can know a lot about you, and while I still may want to do that and still find those necessary things, and of that age where I've gone through that, I'm also of that age where I should know that, hey, I can evolve too. And I can save my liver and cholesterol a little bit and still get the deal done. Great. So yeah, I think that's all imperative, and we've just had greater access to building now and utilizing technology, and the biggest hinder is just fear of evolving to that. We've lived in a virtual world, Pangea, for a long time, and so it's second nature to us. And while I'd love for people to fly us all over the world and do business, they don't have to, because we're effective at this. Silly me. But so that is there and that exists, and that's part of it. And businesses can move this way. Business will move this way. But that doesn't mean that social has to. We can still get together. We can still do all those other fun things, but the deal's already closed. So now we have more to celebrate.
I like that, because I'm someone who wanted to kind of live that. Like I being a social person, being an extrovert, which I almost think is kind of rare at this point. Being an extrovert is very almost rare, kind of, which probably is due to social media and everything. But I have always wanted to do like all the handshaking, close deals at bars. Like I still go to I am practicing on my golf swing. So when I can get onto the golf course with somebody, I can close the deal and not look foolish.
Right.
But now that we've had the pandemic, now
Let
that
them win.
now that we've had the pandemic, now that we've had, this rise in remote work, remote learning, and basically virtual everything, do you think we will ever see that level of off conference room deal making? Like, do you think that we will ever go back to a point where that's how primarily we get connections and close deals?
In a world that is moving forward, I think we have done more than prove that it can be done without. The challenge is right now convincing the old fogies that it really can be, and that's a way to move forward. And I can let go of things, and that letting go and that change is so difficult. But I have to, because the world is adapting, the world is revolving, the world is evolving, and I must do that too. So I think that there are some that hold on to things, and the masses will dictate that they have to let go. There are others that are leading, that are actually leading and moving that way and encouraging and saying, do what's coming. We'll make this work. We'll be successful. We'll be even greater because of this. Let's do it. And I think then that get together and those things that are happening will be even more meaningful. Those social gatherings, those celebrations, those aspects of business that aren't in the business will be even greater, because people will want to. It won't be forced. It won't be necessary. I'll enjoy more being on the golf course if I'm not a golfer, because I'm getting out there with you, and we've come through this and we've moved beyond, and now we really, really get to have fun. Like, that's the motivator, not us closing the deal, not me, pretending to be something to impress you or not impress you, but we're just here having a great old time. And we both shoot well or we both shoot crappy, but who cares? All the other stuff is done, and now we get to be us.
I like it. Okay. So with things moving forward, right? We are now in the virtual aspect. What do you see being the way that people close deals in the future? Like, so we previously were closing deals, on the golf course and the bars and all that kind of stuff. Going forward, because things are now virtual, do you see, like, or you might have like some special knowledge I don't, is there something or a platform or anything or some kind of space or website, or what do you see being the future of the handshaking and deal closing and networking?
So on a sales perspective, when you're talking about deals, you're talking about legacy things. Let's look at where the opportunities where it needed to be, and I'll put that in quotes because it's just the way things were done, to be face-to-face. Money management, life insurance, and those are like huge trusting opportunities and endeavors. I'm stripping down and revealing a whole lot to you. I've got to know you. I've got to trust in that. And I only know that to happen if I meet with you. We don't necessarily understand that this is meeting. I've made some great friends over the last year. I've met one of them in person, one. So it can be done. I have to be open to it. I have to let it happen. Some of those places are going to be more difficult. Some of those types of industries are going to be more difficult. But you and I come to an agreement to produce LEDs on a brand new technology. I don't need to be, even culturally, it would be great,
Right.
but I can't be with you. So what do I wait another year, 2 years, 8 years till the world opens up and all things stop, and then we can come together and shake hands and exchange cards and do this deal that 5 other people have surpassed us on? No, I have to do business now. Business isn't going to stop. The world isn't going to stop. Commerce doesn't stop. We need to do this now. So do I either close the deal with you, or do neither of us get this and somebody else takes it from us? So
So I get
need is
using
going to
FOMO.
dictate some of that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Need will dictate some of that. It will force adjustment. Yes, I've worked in Asia. I come from it. The whole ceremony of meeting and exchanging cards. And I say ceremony on purpose because that's what it is. And it's an honored, respected tradition. I miss doing that, most definitely. But I can't let that part of it, or our inability to physically be there together, interfere with us progressing forward.
Right. Okay.
I can't allow that to happen. So I've got to adapt to make the deal happen. How do I adapt to make the deal happen? I either put people in an uncomfortable situation, or I put people in a less uncomfortable situation in using technology, but a very comfortable situation of getting to know each other. Because I'm not going to act differently here than I will in the restaurant or your office or any other place.
Right.
Authenticity and being me or being you is what's going to matter. And that won't change whether you're sitting there or you're sitting at a hardwood table in a cold office with windows and the sun shining in your face where you're squinting.
I'd probably pat your back a little bit more.
Okay. Those are the things. So it's bringing that to the table. So I think that it's helping people understand that are resistant, that the same thing can be accomplished at the very least. That's what people are missing. I can actually do more this way. I can build more this way. I can be more available this way. I am literally, 10 digits away, 9 digits away, 4.5 seconds, whatever to type, or 1.5 seconds to click on a link, and I'm there. You're in my office with me, wherever you want, whenever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So what's missed is that this can be easier for you. I can make the process easier. I can be more available.
So before I have to let you go, I want to ask a question, and this can be a little bit more personal, right? So we've talked about change a lot. What has been, over the course of your business dealings, what has been the hardest thing for you to adjust to, and how did you adjust to it?
So I would have had to adjust to it.
What's the thing that you found hardest to adjust to? So like it was
Getting
something that
people
was
to
hard.
ask for help. You get them so close and so far. The two challenges is like people, again, it's about relationship, and they have no problem commiserating with their barber, their bartender, except that person can't help them. They can listen really well.
I think the
They say,
bartender
it'll
can
be
help
all
a
right,
little
Joe. Well, the bartender can help temporarily, but he'll go back to the pat on the back. It'll be all right, Joe. Have another bourbon. But they can't help them. So it's getting them to ask help in the right place and the right time with the right person. And that's accepting vulnerability. So that's been the toughest thing to adapt to adjust to accept. And you talk about these things, and you do this, and you go with my team or anybody else that does this kind of work on an individual basis or a team basis, and they're like, that is so frustrating. How do we get people to do that? Help is not a dirty word, but it has become that way. And now more than ever, we should be all turning to each other for help. And so it's great to say, it's great to even put yourself out there to do that, but it still needs to happen. And that only is through the building of the trust. So that part's been very difficult to accept. that there's avenues that they can get help. They can move forward. They can do things if they just ask.
So what's David's ask? What does David need help with? Or what did David need help with that he got help for? Like, was there anything that you like, I needed help and then you got help? What was that?
Yeah, it was letting go of things. So it was understanding in the growth through running a business and being entrepreneurial that there's a time where you can't do it all, and recognizing that before you ruin it all.
You pause, and I want you to know I'm going to take that clip right there that you saved, and I'm going to use that. Like, you can't do it all and you need help. I'm going to use that clip in a commercial probably. I just want you to know that.
Excellent. Yeah, those are big challenges for people. And I've seen it, unfortunately, to the detriment of companies, of too many companies, even companies we were helping, even companies that we've built, and after we've left, see them fall because they don't carry on the principles and they don't move forward under the same practice. And because we're not there, because we're no longer supporting and doing these things, because they're not practicing the systems that were in place, they revert to trying to do and be too much of everything and not focusing on where their strengths are and letting other people capitalize on other strengths. And it literally has destroyed businesses. You have to know when. And I by seeing, I was able to identify when that was, and then a short time later, let go of the reins to let it happen.
Wow. So I get everyone lives and learns.
Yes.
Everyone lives
Hopefully.
And everyone, hopefully. I think that should be a caveat to that little saying. People live and they learn, hopefully. I think that should be the special caveat.
Or they're going to learn, but are they utilizing the lessons? There's your caveat. Are they utilizing the lessons?
That's important. Oh my, yeah, utilization, because it doesn't matter if you don't apply. But it's been absolutely wonderful to have you here today with us, David. You've provided an amazing podcast, and I think that people will find some great value, especially for those trying to like level up and upgrade their businesses. You know, this is what this was for. Business development is so that we can help other businesses develop or grow in that particular sense. And I thank you so much for sharing what you know. Thank
you very much for that. I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you do and where you help. And you know, it is business from, oh my gosh, I just left the rat race. I have a client, but what does it mean to be a business, all the way up to the megaliths and the problems that are swept under the rug because they're just so big, they don't think it matters. It is all, each and every step of the way through that process is about development and developing the people positively, so the business comes and continues to come. Okay. So you've kind of shifted a little bit on your social. So before we officially get you out, give yourself a shameless plug. Where can we find you? How do people get in contact with you? If someone were to say, hey, I want to work with David. I love Angelo and he had him on the podcast. So I want to work with David. How does someone get in contact with you? I am on LinkedIn. You can look up David Carley and you will find me there. And that's pretty much it. I think I'm on something else called Alignable. I don't know if that's as easy to find, but it's an app that you can get through the app stores. But the easiest way to locate me through any medium is at LinkedIn. All right, send the link and I'll make sure that we have it in the description. All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey Ramblers, that's it. Podcast is over. Don't leave yet though. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on YouTube at OffSource HQ. We'll see you next time.